I think we're ready.
Good stuff. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this session on how finance and integration as a service can remove barriers to growth in your business. My name is Robertson. Just a quick intro. I'm Sales and Marketing Director of a company called BrightBridge Solutions. The company is 4.5 years old now, and we were formed by a group of colleagues who worked together for many, many years in a previous life, where I was responsible for the UK Microsoft business, the US IT corporation, working with quite a few financial services institutions such as Barclays, Citi, Metro, Irish Life, Wesleyan, so quite a lot, going over quite a large period of time. Today our business is somewhat different to that. We are involved with the product called Oracle NetSuite One World, which is a financial management solution, where in this instance our consulting colleagues implement financial management solutions for financial statement consolidation, deep reporting, real-time analysis, generally speaking across companies where there are multiple subsidiaries, multiple currencies, multiple languages, and multiple tax jurisdictions. Furthermore, we actually assist companies also to meet your regulatory requirements through systems integration automation. So this is where our NetSuite One World platform and my colleagues at Jitterbit can actually help them move away from systems where disparate systems, unconnected processes, manual processes, into one completely unified financial platform integrated with your trading platforms or your own systems innovation, of course. But being a 100% cloud environment, both NetSuite and Jitterbit, it allows us to give you the foundation for scaling your business up unhindered by any issues around hardware availability. And that's one of the key reasons why we've found the NetSuite community has been growing very rapidly recently, particularly attractive to startups, scale-ups and high-growth businesses who really want to focus on your own business environment and your own IT systems of innovation rather than supporting your back office IT infrastructure. So really our objective over the last couple of days, to be fair, is to meet as many companies such as yourselves who may be starting on this journey to a more robust financial management solution. I'm pleased to say we spoke to one or two already, which is good. So I'm joined by two of my colleagues here, Jonathan and Ken, and we're going to spend the next sort of 15-20 minutes or so just trying to give you some indications as to the whys and wherefores of how you might actually go along that journey. And that was me. Ken?
Yes, so my name is Kenneth Rasch. I work for a company called Jitterbit. In essence, what we do is we are an integrated platform as a service, and also called IPass. We are natively built in the cloud, but I would say the most common challenges our customers have is they typically operate in silos, both within the group organization, but also within the different business units. They typically have a lot of different systems, like the panel was talking about previously. That data or platform sits typically on-premise and cloud applications, and ultimately what we do is we unlock that value that sits in those on-premise applications, sharing that with the new cloud applications that could either be AI, the open banking applications, marketing applications, CRM and so on, to make data and information share across those platforms. Where we're different than other integration platforms is we are natively built for the cloud, and our approach is really about how can technical BAs and platform or application SMEs support a platform or else and get connectivity between these platforms.
Thanks very much, Ken. I'm Jonathan Smith. My background, I've done 20 plus years in financial services, firstly in retail banking, and then crossing over the fence into investment banking, where I worked for a number of years for LCH, London Clearing House. I worked on their finance executive and sat on two of the management committees. And after that time, I set up Aiteo Consulting with a view to providing accountancy, finance and advisory services into startups and scale-ups. To be honest, I kind of fell into doing this. I started off by being an interim CFO, working for startups in this area. And gradually, as I've been doing that, I've been sort of rolling out what is effectively finance as a service. So looking at startups and scale-ups, what their requirements are, and seeing how I can deliver those within my business. Sometimes working as an interim CFO, sometimes packaging up a discrete piece of work that a startup or scale-up is looking for. If you look on the table, this is the subliminal message bit. You'll see my little card which tells you who we work with and the kind of problems that we solve, including building the function, so if you think about what the requirements of startups and scale-ups are, building a finance function, finance process and architecture, which includes some of the things we'll be talking about this morning, resourcing as well, so helping you to build your function and resource it, and then building the outputs as well, so that can cover a wide range of things. There's only a limited amount of things that would fit on the card, financial planning and modelling, and that also covers the things like the fundraising and periods that startups and scale-ups will be going through. I've worked through with those businesses, going through those kind of processes, helping with fundraising, and then building other outputs, including management accounting, and integrating them into systems such as we're talking about this morning. So that's me.
Lovely, thanks Jonathan. So we've got a number of topics to discuss, and there's quite a large list which we know we've got to deal with a lot of the organisations in the room and in the conference are dealing with. But we picked these four, which I think gives quite a broad spectrum. So maybe I'll kick off, and Jonathan, let's start at the beginning of the process. So can you talk us through some of the factors as CFO, or indeed that yourself, will have to take into consideration when making a decision to implement a new financial management system?
Sure. So I think there can be some variation depending on the life cycle of the business, but there's a number of considerations that are common across business stages. So I'm answering, given the conference that we're at, I'm really answering from the point of view of the start of a growing business, and the kind of considerations that I've brought to bear when I'm in these kind of situations. So I think the first thing, as CFO or interim CFO or representing finance, I'm going to promote finance as a business critical function, which means that I'm going to lobby for it to be resourced appropriately and built and supported appropriately. So the overarching considerations when we think from the point of view of an accounting system is, can I get the MI into an environment where we can rely on one version of the truth? There may be various sources of MI and various functions that want to own particular metrics, but can I get that into an environment where it gives us one version of the truth? And then the other overarching consideration is around growth, because if we're particularly considering fintech, we're thinking about growth companies and how will the system help me with growth. So we think about will it help the rest of the company on its growth journey. So you might think about things like the operations area, the customer management and so on. And can my finance system not just be a finance system, but something that can plug into other areas of the business? And I think that's a very important one for buy-in. And then the other overarching consideration, I think, for me, and this is for startups in particular, I will look at how will this system scale. So it's not just a question of is it good for now, but how will it scale, because we're planning for growth, and is it resilient? So I'll be looking at things like, what are the product roadmaps for the system? Is it backed? Is it well supported and backed by a recognised name? And then I'll also be looking at things like hosting. So this is something that was discussed in the sessions yesterday. I think Chris Skinner in his opening section referred to the fact that some of these middle office systems, if they're hosted on the cloud, you have an immediate cost benefit in the sense of being able to deploy quickly. So one of the questions would be, how is it hosted, how is it deployed? So those are my overarching considerations.
Thanks, Jonathan. But with those considerations in mind, you've obviously been through this process recently about implementing these into fintech startups. And what were the benefits and metrics that you're actually looking to achieve from that investment?
So I think particularly when you're in a startup situation, when you approach classically when you approach a business case from a financial point of view, you'll think, what if I implement this system, how will it save me money? And in a startup situation, you've got to look at it slightly differently, because it's not going to be cost reduction because you aren't spending money and you're now going to be spending money. So you've got to then think of framing as a facilitator for growth. So I think there's a number of soft areas of benefit when we look at implementing these systems. And then there will be some areas which are sort of financially measurable to some extent, and then obviously you have to lay those out.
Can you give us an example of 2 or 3 of those?
Yeah, so if we can think purely from the finance function perspective, I think there's a number of processes that you would look to streamline. Even in a startup situation, if you implement a very simple accounting package on day 1, what tends to happen is on day 2, you open up Excel, start doing things outside of the system, and start creating reconciliation issues. So you want to look at, can this system help me streamline the processes and take away all this kind of non-value-added activity and reconciliation activity? And that is a financial benefit, because you can measure that. You might be maybe an avoided cost in terms of the number of staff that you have to employ, but there's a financial benefit that you can attach to that. And then I think you can look at the increased financial control, and this is often a very, considered I think, quite boring benefit, but actually increased financial control does help in terms of helping you make the right decisions, and bearing in mind you're thinking about when you scale. So if you put workflow approvals and things like that in, and the system can handle that, what you're doing is firstly obviously avoiding things like fraud, but then also making sure that the right decisions are getting made at the right level, and you can flex that accordingly. And I think overall, you've got to look at it. Does the system have the capacity to support my growing business, and the fact that processes will change? And then I think if the decision is, and it's obviously not a formal conclusion, but if the decision is, and I have to say when I do it, it usually is, that it's going to be cloud-based, then you can look at accelerated implementation, because it can be switched on very quickly, and you're freeing up things like support and implementation cost in the IT function, so there's a cost benefit there too.
Yeah. Well, that makes sort of sense from where I'm sitting, Jonathan. How do you then actually manage to sell that back into your other execs when, I guess, they were entirely focused on charging forward with the business?
Yeah. So I think the challenge back is always going to be, let's try and stretch what we've got. This is not a business critical thing. This is a challenge that finance often has to deal with. Let's save the money. In a recent implementation that I was involved with, where I was on the business side, the investor director of the startup said, look, I used QuickBooks in one of my previous companies. It was a £300 million turnover company. Why do we need something which is of a bigger growth and scale? And then when you think of something like QuickBooks, which is a great package for what it is, it's something a bit like akin to Xero, which maybe many of you heard of, very good for early stage startups, but as you start to grow and scale, these things get slightly out of control. So I think one of the things you've got to do is leverage the industry you're in. Here we're at a FinTech conference, so the chances are you're going to be interacting with the regulators in some way, maybe even making an application for regulatory approval in some way. So I would say don't submit a business case that says you're going to run your books on the same kind of accounting package that advertises the shoot shops and freelancers. You want to give the regulator, maybe just gently promote it in your business case and say, we're using this package. Our books and records are going to be held on a credible system, which has got great technology and backup and resilience. But mostly I would say the execs kind of get the benefits that you're selling. They want to see that it will wash its face, so you can look at things like, if you give me the system, I will give you a lean finance function that uses leading technology, which will integrate closely with other business areas, and that's usually a big win.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. So we've set the scene, so let's move on to the next point, and we'll change it around, Jonathan, and let you ask some questions and give your voice a rest.
Thanks very much. So I'm going to turn to Ken. And Ken, I learned a new acronym yesterday, which was IPass, Integration Platform as a Service. Now I've seen Jitterbit in action in one or two places, but this is a new acronym for me. So can you kind of explain what that means, and for a business that is looking to implement an IPass such as Jitterbit, what are the main business objectives that customers are seeking when they're looking to implement something like this?
Sure. I think the number one thing is most likely around single customer view. Everybody keeps talking about we need to understand our customers better, we need to understand the segment to sit and operate, and then start taking that to market. The other there's obviously a lot of other benefits that are coming out from single customer view, because that's how you drive growth, but also how do you drive cost reduction within that business. We genuinely believe, and most of our customers, they go out and invest in best-of-breed applications, whether that sits across service, sales, core banking, payment transactions we talked about earlier. And ultimately what Jitterbit does is we bring those applications to talk to each other. These applications are natively not built to talk to each other. Fair enough to have APIs, some have databases, etc. We basically bring that connective tissue into making these applications to talk to each other and understand each other. The other benefit that comes into it is really about employee satisfaction. So, as I mentioned earlier, we are not a development platform. It is really more for the business users or the business analysts, how they can get this to connect into. We do that at a very different speed. So typically our customers expect that data to be shared across these platforms very fast. And also the terminology open banking was mentioned earlier. That means that you need to share that data not just within your business, but also externally. So that can be used within your wider marketplace, across your trading partners, your normal partners within your fintech organization, but also very much around your customers. You need to be able to share that data with your customer so they can make a good decision and then basically interact with your organization.
Great, thanks very much, Ken. So if customers are able to sort of unlock that data from their legacy systems, how can they use that data that they've unlocked to streamline their business?
Yeah, so the other thing I genuinely believe is these applications are built to do what they do. But the issue with these applications is typically where data is being created, that's also where that data is going to sit. So when you talk about on-premise applications, that typically sits within the legacy stuff that happens in a lot of businesses. We can basically unlock that data. At the moment, a lot of that data or information is shared by people, paper, processes being moved around, which is not very efficient. It costs you a lot of money, it costs time. I believe the gentleman was talking about it kind of earlier that you're having some of your most expensive staff in your organization who's trying to use that data, fill out forms, etc. We automate it by filling in those forms.
Lovely, that's great. Thanks for that, Ken. So, regulation and compliance has been those 2-3 words I've heard many times in the last day and a half. So again, Jonathan, what functional attributes would you be looking for in a system to support these issues?
So I think, again, given the conference we're at and the likely expectations of growing fintech businesses, you've got to assume that your aspirations are likely to be global, if not regional, at least. So in implementing that, so for example, I implemented, I was the business sponsor for implementation of NetSuite recently into a growing fintech, which at the time was purely based in the UK. However, the aspirations were global, so I looked for a globally recognised standards compliance solution, something that would be able to cope with different reporting environments such as US GAAP, UK GAAP, IFRS and so on. And coupled with that, something that could give you tax localization too. So we were looking at different entities which were going to be open within Europe and also in the US. That's a feature as well. But really, you then come on to the shiny bits of the accounting platform, and what can it do? What can it actually do with the data? So you'd be looking at and this is a very high-level view of it, the deep reporting capability that you might have, the ability to drill down into transactional details and look at the kind of dashboard metrics that you can produce. So that's the other key thing that we'll be looking at. And then there are some hygiene factors which you would expect, audit trails and user access logs and all those kind of things. So you're getting under the bonnet of what the system can do.
Good. So coming towards the end then, so you've now recognised the need, you know what the attributes are, arriving at decision point. So in your experience, given your fintech experience really, what examples of these decision points do you actually have?
Okay. So I think my key takeaway, to put the key takeaway at the top of the answer, is if you're in a situation like I am as a CFO, is to implement as soon as possible so that you get ready for growth. And I think it's possible to delay the decision, but it's effectively kicking the difficult decision down the road. So I think in a startup situation, you can be in a startup situation where funding is scarce. And I think the first consideration is how much cash do you have, and then what can you do to mitigate the cash burn on behalf of the finance function until you have some funding in place. So as an example, in a recent implementation that I did whatever I could do for free. So in the first couple of weeks, I think, of getting in there, I brought these guys, BrightBridge, in, had conversations with the service providers, other service providers, and did the broad business case around costs, implementation, high-level requirements. And you can actually do that in a cash-strapped, you might say, or cash-scarce situation quite cheaply or almost for free, and then basically wait for the funding to come along.
Good. So what are the steps you think would make it a success?
I think basically to implement incrementally as much as possible. We've seen many sort of big bang implementations, and I think if the scale and growth of the business permits it, implement incrementally. So the recent implementation that we did at Coiny, we had just basic cost centres and a couple of entities and migrated that from a basic bookkeeping system. And that still requires quite a lot of planning. So make it easy as possible to validate that your migration has worked, and then move on and switch on some of your growth aspects of the platform.
Lovely, thanks Jonathan. Well, we're just about out of time. That went across very quickly. So if I just leave you with this summary slide. You've heard all these words before, funnily enough, in the last 15 minutes or so of our discussion. But that's pretty much what we do. It's pretty much what our solution provides. You probably notice a very, very bright standout sign, which looks not dissimilar to that. So if you'd like to come across and spend some time talking to us about what we've covered in the last 20 minutes, myself and my colleagues will be on the stand for the remainder of the afternoon. Thank you very much indeed.